to act underwater and to act like being terrified or you're in panic, it's very close to the real emotion, of course. And when you have, when you panic underwater, it is actually dangerous. So we had to make sure that they're really confident underwater and really good.
So hello, Max. It is so nice to meet you.
Hey, too. Nice to meet you.
Oh my God, I love this film so much. I love underwater films. So I was so excited to see this one. Well, just to start off, I mean, I know you've done thrillers before, but it looks like this was your first time kind of doing an underwater movie like this.
Yes.
Yeah. So what was the inspiration here?
It's kind of a remake of a Swedish film that came out a few years ago. It's called Breaking Surface, and it's a little bit different, but the production company who was also involved in or had the remake rights, so to say, they approached me to do this, and I read the screenplay and I thought, no, I'm not going to do a remake. Why would I do a remake? But then it was underwater and it was about diving, and I was like, I am a passionate diver myself, so I think, I cannot not do this. It's impossible. I have to see what I can do with it. So I started writing and see how if I was inspired to kind of do my own take of it. And and then I just got into it and fell into it. And I mean, what an opportunity to do a film like this. It's not, it's not an everyday thing for me. So I had to do it.
I'm not a diver by any means, but from what I could pick up on, it seemed like there was a lot of effort into making this really factually accurate. Knowing that you're a diver yourself, then did you bring in any advisors, or was this all kind of your own knowledge base?
We had advisors. We have the underwater cinematographers who are super pros, and we have of course a dive supervisor from Malta. The whole dive crew in Malta was actually amazing. I mean, they live from and in the water. They're like fish actually, and they helped a lot, I have to say. I mean, story-wise, it was not that difficult because it's not what they do in the film. It's not like an extreme sport. It's not like something completely crazy. It's like it's kind of realistic in a way, or not kind of. It is, I mean, compared to shark films underwater, it is actually, it's all real. And the idea was to shoot it for real underwater, of course. And there's almost no CGI in it. And that was, of course, that was a great, great challenge. But it was also a lot of fun to shoot in the ocean. It's like a film in nature.
So what kind of challenges came along with being underwater for, so many of these scenes?
Filmmaking is difficult enough, right? But underwater, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, let's start with communication. Yeah, you can't, after a take, you can't just talk to the actors or to the cinematographer. You just have to come up with the weirdest thing. I mean, I kind of had, a line to one of the cinematographers, but then it didn't work all the time. And the best thing was I had we called it the God loudspeaker. So I could just shout in the water, and I was hoping that somebody gets it. And but then that didn't work. And then you start with hand signs, and that's really difficult. Because then, of course, because the communication is so hard, we did a lot of preparation. Of course, we actually had storyboards, which we could take underwater, so we could show them, okay, this is next. And and of course, it's a big safety issue. Of course, you have to have a lot of safety divers taking care of anyone, and you have to make sure that the nitrogen level of every diver that is underwater is always in the safety zone. And of course, you can stay underwater 45 minutes the most, and you can do this 3 times a day. And so, the actual shooting time is very, very small. So, and what else? I mean, and finding the actresses, who were crazy enough to do this, because they didn't do any diving before, and they had to learn it from scratch. And I was very, very anxious about that they would stop at some point. Because it's a psychological thing with diving. You think you are up to it and you want to do it, and you do it for, I don't know, a few days, a few weeks, but then you have one bad experience, and then you might just say, okay, I can't do it anymore. I have to stop. And I was nervous about that a lot, but luckily, Sophie and Louisa, like, they fell in love with diving, and they became really, really good. And that was really necessary also, because when you act, you have to see, to act underwater and to act like being terrified or you're in panic, it's very close to the real emotion, of course. And when you panic underwater, it is actually dangerous. So we had to make sure that they are, really confident underwater and really good. And that was quite a challenge.
Well, there's a lot of kind of medium and long shots here. Was that all done as well, or did you have any professional divers come in to film those?
Well, what do you mean? Medium? Yeah, we had like doubles, of course. Yeah, for the real deep stuff, we had we had doubles from Malta. Is it double? Is it the right word?
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, I was curious how much of this was actually the actors underwater as opposed to a double, like you said, filming the scenes. Yeah.
I mean, the real crazy stuff, when you see one of the girls like shooting up, from 30 meters up, that was a stunt double, of course. Yeah, I mean, this is a highly professional free diver, actually. So all that was really amazing to get to know them. All those divers in Malta, most of them are also free divers, and we had a lot of free divers also in the crew, because when you have to surface very quick or go down very fast and then surface, you can't do this with scuba because of the nitrogen levels. So those were free divers doing all this, quick descending, quick ascending, and it's a whole beautiful, fascinating world, this free diving community.
I was also curious how much ADR was used here. I didn't know how much they were actually, like, if they had mics attached to their gear and they were actually talking underwater, if you had to go back and overlay that.
So we had microphones in the mask, and we recorded everything. So we had the original sound. But then again, it's very often it didn't really work. And now we did a lot of ADR. Actually, almost everything that is underwater, we did ADR, but it's still like the original sound is still in the mix. And it makes it real also. I mean, the most difficult part but also the most fun part in post-production was the sound, because you can do so much with it, and all the anxiety and all the tension very much comes from the breathing, and of course from the voices, and not understanding the other one enough, and then you have all this communication breakdown. And but we did a lot of ADR. And sometimes I have to say it was actually super hard for Sophie and Louisa to understand each other, because sometimes it just fell apart and they had to read their lips to actually communicate. So this is not really, the systems are not really reliable. They are real. I mean, there are those intercom systems, but they're not that reliable.
Well, besides a couple of kind of, brief flashbacks, they were really the only two actors in this film. I mean, they're carrying the whole thing. So how was working with such a small cast?
Yeah, it was great, actually. I mean, that was the idea from the beginning. It's just those two, and it's very how do you say, concealed? No, very it's just like a theater play with those two, and of course we rehearsed everything, and during the rehearsals I knew that it's going to work with those two. I mean, they were amazing, really, and I was just amazed by them and their discipline also. So, I mean, Louisa, she was in the rock for hours, actually, because it's such a hassle to, when everybody goes up and down again. So sometimes we just left her under the rock in the studio, I have to say, not in the ocean, right? We just left in the rock, and everybody was going up, and she was chilling out there, just meditating. And then, we had the camera rolling again, and she was in the zone all the time. It was amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me about the film. Oh my gosh, it was so cool to hear all the BTS tidbits about all this underwater stuff.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.